When was your gut feeling actually right? When I was a young woman, my husband and I lived on a military base. At the time, the base was wide open and many local people used it as a shortcut from one town to another. The base also had free base newspapers available at many places on base. One week, the newspaper said that facilities engineers, base maintenance, were going to begin installing attic fans in our townhouses. Sure enough, someone banged on my door later in the week and announced he was there to install my attic fan. I was immediately suspicious. He was not military, dirty, scraggly beard, paint-stained clothes. But mostly, it was my dog's reaction. Candy was a husky shepherd mix, so not a small dog. She'd put herself between me and him as best as she could. Her hackles were up and she was growling. That deep bass in the chest growl that you feel more than hear. I asked to see a work order and ID. He said, "I don't need no frickin' work order," and yanked open the screen door. It was latched, but those kind of latches are meant to keep toddlers and dogs in, not grown men out. Candy roared and went for his throat. He jumped back and slammed the screen. I grabbed Candy, dragged her back, slammed and locked the door, ran to the back and slammed and locked that. Then I called the MPs. They came out, verified that my street was not due to get attic fans for a couple of weeks, and took all the information I could give them, which wasn't much. I never heard anything back, so they probably never identified him. 2 or 3 weeks later, the real installers came from facility engineers in uniform. They promptly produced work orders and ID. Candy looked at them and went back to playing with the baby. I am absolutely certain she saved me from assault or possibly murder. Okay, so fun fact about your narrator boy. Huskies and shepherds, well, specifically Australian shepherds, my 2 favorite dog breeds. As if I needed any more reason to love them, Candy comes in here like an absolute hero. Oh, I love dogs. And I love those dogs in particular. Great work, Candy. Story 2. It was 1995. I was 18, still living with my parents, and I was walking home from a friend's house at about 2 a.m. in the middle of the summer. He only lived 5 or 6 blocks away, and we often hung out watching movies after I got off work. Usually I would drive to his house because we'd been out with other friends, but this night I'd parked at home and we walked to his place. There's not usually a lot of traffic between our houses, but this night I was about halfway home when a pickup truck drives with 2 guys in the cab and 2 in the bed. I immediately felt like I was in danger. I saw the truck turn the corner and I dove over some hedges in the closest yard I could find. I hid under them. I saw the truck come back around the corner and slowly drive down the street. When it got to where I was hiding, I heard one of the guys say, "Where did he go?" And another responded, "I don't know." They kept driving and I didn't see them again. I stayed hidden for a good 15 minutes before getting up and running the rest of the way home. I'm certain they would have jumped me if they found me. Story 3. One of my mates had a similar experience while living in London. He worked in hospitality, which often meant he didn't get home until very late in a suburb called Seven Sisters, which wasn't the safest. He gets off the tube, starts walking back to his place at about 2 a.m. He notices there are 3 very large men following him. He said he couldn't explain it, but he started feeling weird. So he tested it out by slowing down and speeding up his walking pace. They would match it every single time. He hadn't been living in this place very long and had 3 keys. One for the front door, one for the back door, and one for his room. Being at a new place, he didn't have a feeling for which key was which quite yet. So when he got to his front door, the first key he tried didn't work. He looks back and notices the guys have opened the little gate to his small front yard garden and are on his property walking towards him. He tries the second key and it unlocks the front door. He closes it, locks it again, and kind of just collapses to his knees to look through the mail slot and sees the 3 guys just standing there talking amongst themselves for about 3 minutes before they take off. My mate asks himself what the hell they would have done to him if it had been the 3rd key that unlocked the front door. Story 4. Growing up, I was always wary of my uncle on my dad's side of the family, not blood-related. Even as a young child, I just knew I didn't like being around him. He never gave me any reason to feel this way, and I never voiced it to anyone. As I grew older, my family moved away and I saw less of him. But anytime my extended family met for holidays, I would see him and avoid him. A couple years down the track, I was around 12 or 13. My parents sat me and my older brother down and told us that my cousin, my uncle's daughter, had been assaulted and touched by him from a young age. This had all come to light when my aunt caught it happening. Later found out she was abused by him too. Really wish my gut feeling hadn't been right about that one. When it comes to gut feelings like this, I wonder what it is. Because I do believe that these gut feelings are real things. Like something about us knows that someone or something or some situation is trouble. It's pretty incredible actually. I should look into it. Story 5. I stopped at Home Depot to pick up an item, so I knew it was going to be a quick trip. I'm in the store and notice I'm pretty much the only girl there besides employees. I couldn't find what I was looking for and had to ask multiple employees before I found it. I check out, and as I'm heading out to my car, I notice a shady dude standing against a tree on one side of my car. On the other side of my car is another shady guy sticking his arm outside his car window. When I walked out, they both turned and stared at me. My heart dropped. I started to feel queasy. My mind instantly knew to turn around and go inside. I stood there shaking at the front of the store until I could get the courage to ask an employee to walk me to my car. As soon as they saw me walking out with an employee, the guy standing by the tree walked around my car into the driver's side of the car parked next to me. To this day, I swear I was a short walk away from being kidnapped. Story 6. Used to work in the ER. Had a man come in with ripping chest pain that started not but 30 minutes prior after he moved something heavy in his office. I knew he was going to die just by looking at him. Massive, overwhelming dread just seemed to engulf me. I did his EKG and I hoped something would be wrong with it so we could get him a bed. His EKG was perfect. Not 5 minutes later, he went into cardiac arrest on our waiting room floor. After running the code for 45 minutes, he didn't make it. He had a massive aortic dissection. There wasn't much hope. This was almost 3 years ago, and I've seen more stuff since then, but the memory is still burned into my mind, and it hurts knowing I was the last person to speak to him. I can only imagine how terrifying this would be as a medical professional, to have this feeling that something is wrong, we need to help this person, but not knowing what or how, or even if you can, and then ultimately not being able to. I hope OP doesn't hold it against themselves in any way because, it's super not their fault. It really sucks, and it kind of sucks more that they knew it was coming too. Story 7. I was a 20-year-old student alone in my apartment one evening. I was expecting the cable guy, so when I heard a knock at the door, I opened it. I saw an older man that was definitely not the cable guy. He didn't have a uniform on. I asked him what he wanted. He said he was going around the apartments installing security alarms. I right away did not trust him and told him it was a bad time, and that my roommate was on the phone long distance with her parents and was going through some personal stuff, back when long distance was expensive. She wasn't really there, but I did not want him to think I was alone. He said, "Where is she?" I just closed the door in his face and said, "Not a good time." I called my landlord the next morning and asked her about installing security alarms, and she had no idea what I was talking about and did not authorize it. Women, if you ever get into a situation where it looks like you're alone, really try to convince the person that is making you feel uneasy that you are not alone. Another time when I was young, walking home in the dark and 2 men stopped their car and started saying lewd things to me, I just walked up to a house and knocked on the door and they drove off quickly. You are simply way more vulnerable when you're alone. I just hate that this is a concern, man. Like, it just sucks that people have to be on their guard all the time, and it is sort of just human nature. There's gonna be terrible people out there. That's kind of just a universal truth, unfortunately, but I don't know, I still hate it. I think people would be a lot more productive and just happier if they didn't have to be on guard all the time, you know? But that's a little idealistic, even for me. Story 8. Driving in Pittsburgh. I stop at a red light. Hill goes up on my left, downhill on my right. Poor visibility to the left. The light turns green, but my brain tells me, hey, bud, wait a sec. I think it's a little weird, but I don't go yet. A millisecond later, a massive navy blue F-350 comes barreling downhill through the intersection from my left, blowing past the red light at about 45 and then trundles down the hill. If I'd have gone, I would have been destroyed by 3 tons of Ford truck for sure. Instead, I trusted the spidey sense. Story 9. Not me, but my wife. I had a work friend who used to come over to smoke blunts and play Xbox. I liked the guy even though I knew he was a bit odd. He was really good at Call of Duty and rolled a mean blunt. He used to tell some tall tales that everyone knew were BS. Well, my wife, who was only my girlfriend back then, always got a creep vibe from him. She said he looked at her with so much anger and malice, but never indicated any specific action that made her uncomfortable. After a while, I stopped hanging out with the friend since he wasn't coming to town as much for work. Fast forward a few years and another mutual friend calls me to say the Xbox friend was shot by police. Unfortunately, only after he had already ended his neighbor and his wife. Crazy. All I'm getting from this is OP is not a good judge of character at all. That's a joke, by the way, I'm not serious. There's no way OP could have really known. But it's probably good you distanced yourself from him at the very least. People like that tend to be ticking time bombs, and you don't really want to be close to them when they explode. It sucks that that happens at all, though, because there's no telling what set him off. It could have been anything. It could be undiagnosed mental issues or, as I said, anything. So it's fully possible it's not even the guy's fault either. And I didn't want to say anything without mentioning that too, because, I don't know, I want to be fair to everyone. Horrifying, though, nonetheless. Story 10. I'd been living and working in Korea. One day I was coming up out of a subway station and saw a man talking to another foreign woman. She had that polite frozen smile on her face, the "why is this guy talking to me" smile. I walked up to her, linked my arm with hers and said, "Hey Sarah, there you are you ready to go?" and just started walking. The guy followed us, but I sped up and made an abrupt turn into a coffee shop. We hid, I saw him walk past, still looking for her. We ended up getting coffee and chatting for a bit, and I had found out that he'd followed her off the train and had been getting increasingly aggressive for the last 10 minutes. I don't know what might have happened, but I'm really glad I intervened. Story 11. Last year, I was staying up late watching Rick and Morty. My mom had been battling stage 4 metastatic breast cancer for a while. That night, she walked downstairs and just sat with me until I decided to go to bed. I looked at her, and in my heart, I knew she was close to leaving. So I said good night, and she said goodbye, which confused me. Until the next morning when my dad woke me up and told me she had passed away overnight. It still makes me wonder how we both knew. Obi, that was unfair. This one really caught me off guard, and I actually just started tearing up because I was just not ready, man. This is a really heartbreaking turn on what a gut feeling means, you know? I didn't expect it. That being said, it's still as incredible and amazing as the other gut feelings in here. It plucked my heartstrings. Story 12. When I was a young kid back in the 80s, I was playing on my front lawn when this van pulled up on the road and the sliding door opened. A guy, about 19 or 20, aggressively waved at me to come to the van. I immediately knew something wasn't right, so I ran inside and told my parents, and they freaked out and ran outside, but the van was gone by then. Stranger danger wasn't really a thing back then, and I had no idea what an abduction was at the time. But looking back on it, my life could have ended that day had I chose to go over to the van. I often wondered after that day if they did get a kid to get into their van. Story 13. It started out as a gut feeling when I felt that something was off about my mom's boyfriend. Once I felt this way, I started to notice the red flags. The first one was the way my dog reacted to him. Even to this day, he's the only person my dog flat out did not like. I think he might have even kicked him at one point when we weren't around. The next major red flag I noticed was that whenever his daughters came over, 6 and 8, they rarely wanted to spend time with their own father and would hang out with my mom. It almost felt like they were trying to avoid him. I ended up bringing my concerns to my mom, and she started to notice things too, so she broke it off. A few months later, she gets contacted by an investigator. Apparently, the boyfriend had been caught trying to sleep with his current girlfriend's daughter, so they wanted to get a statement from mom. I'm just glad he got caught, and it sounds like he'll be in jail for quite some time. My mom's the only woman in the house, so I don't think the dude was trying to come after my brother or I. Plus, we're both bigger than the man, too. OP, when you say sleep with his current girlfriend's daughter, does it mean what I think you mean? Because if that is what you mean, then might I propose a change in diction? Perhaps the word assault works a lot better here. It is interesting mentioning the dog thing, though. That comes up again. Dogs seem to have a pretty good intuition about people. Story 14. When I was a kid, I had this teacher, I think grade 3, who was really creepy towards all of us girls. We would notice him looking at girls' butts or down their shirts. He was really weird and always found a reason to make girls stay after class for whatever. He gave me a really terrible feeling that I had never gotten from anyone else before. I never got too close to him and always made sure I wasn't in his room alone. I'm 25 now, and he just got arrested last year for having child content and was also caught with a hidden camera in his pen, which he would use to take pictures down girls' shirts with. So creepy. Can't imagine the amount of videos or pictures this man has. He was an older man when he taught me in grade 3 and just got caught last year. Story 15. There are a bunch of bars right next to my university here where I live. At the start and the end of the semester, everybody, thousands of students, start gathering around the street where most bars are located and just party all night. On one of these occasions, in 2019, it was the end of the semester. I just got there a bit late because I was working on the lab at the uni, and the moment I got there, something just didn't feel right. The people there, how they were acting, how they were moving, how they were talking, something felt different in the air. We were crossing through the giant group of people since we were looking for my girlfriend at the time, and the people who we were expecting to meet there. I froze in place, and I can't really explain why to this day, but I just felt like something bad was about to happen. And my friend noticed how I was too attentive and kind of in a panic. He snapped me out of it, and I told him we need to find everyone and leave. To my surprise, he just agreed. I think he noticed something was wrong with me and probably just went for it so I would calm down. My girlfriend and our friends didn't take long to find, but they were confused because I was acting so erratic and having a kind of panic attack. Eventually, they followed me out of the crowd, and right as we were out of the bar area, we started hearing a bunch of gunshots. Shortly after, the police were rushing into the area. What happened was that some gang members decided to use the party to settle some score, probably hoping the crowd would help them get out unnoticed. 5 people died and 3 were injured that day. The police apparently caught them, but I'm not sure about that part. After that, those periodical parties at the street were never the same. Way fewer people. And now they don't even close the streets anymore because it's not that big of a crowd. Who would have thought? To this day, my friends like telling this story about how I saved their lives, and on rare occasions, someone asks me if I knew about the gang fight that was going to happen or something like that. I honestly don't know what triggered me on that day, but myself and the people with me are really glad it did. I think I might have caught a view of a gun while crossing the crowd and didn't consciously notice it, but it kicked in some sense of danger for me. What absolutely despicable behavior from the gangs, by the way. To purposefully get innocent people caught up in whatever is going on is just gross, disgusting. You're all losers, basically, is what I'm saying. By definition, I think it's kind of an act of terrorism on a smaller scale. I'm not sure on that one, though, so maybe I should just stop talking. Really, though, OP, I'm glad you listened to your senses, too, and got the people you loved out of there. Pretty wild thing to be able to predict coming, in a way, but I'm sure everyone who you got out of there was very thankful. Story 16. A few years back, I was dating a girl who went camping with a friend for a couple of weeks. I didn't mind because I trusted her, but I started to get a gut feeling she was cheating on me while she was gone. Shortly before she was supposed to come back into town, she called and dumped me over the phone. Bonus points, since I literally just had brain surgery that she didn't bother to come back into town for. Edit. Should say, dumped me for him. Story 17. 2 times with older guys when I was a teenager. 1. Friend and I were with my family camping. There was this really cute older guy camping by himself. He invited us over to his campfire and we talked for a bit. Then he invited my friend and I into his camper. We were probably 12 or 13 at the time. She wanted to go in, but I started shaking uncontrollably and refused. I wouldn't leave until she came with me. I have no confirmation that he had bad intentions, but looking back, I can't imagine they were good. And 2. When I was 15, this cute older waiter asked me for my number. First time it ever happened to me, so I was super geeked. He called and we talked a few times, but he only wanted to see me again if he could come to my house with no one else home. I ended up going back to the restaurant to see him again, and I had another one of those uncontrollable shaking moments. Got so bad, I just left. Turned out he was in my state working as a waiter because he fled his state due to legal troubles. Not to mention he clearly only wanted one thing and I was 15. Story 18. I hadn't spoken to a certain friend for a couple of weeks, but got a gut feeling to contact and talk to her at a certain moment. I immediately messaged her. That's how we always talked. We talked for a couple hours and into the night. A month later, out of the blue, she messages me, "Thank you." I asked her why she's thanking me. She said she was contemplating ending herself on the day I got my gut feeling and contacted her. Because she got to talk to someone on that specific day, she dropped the idea and hasn't attempted it again ever since. Story 19. Hindsight is 2020. None of these things by themselves seemed weird until I looked at them all together. I was in a college class. The professor was young, clearly missed his college days, and gave off that vibe of wanting to be everyone's friend. During the first session, we were going over the syllabus, and he said, "If you're gonna miss a class, just come to my office hours." Fine, that's pretty standard, except he kept saying it. Any questions, whether about the class or anything else, he really wanted us to go to his office hours. He must have mentioned it 3 or 4 times in that one period. Over the course of the first few weeks, he clearly made a favorite of me. Nothing that crossed a line, but in his attempt to be everyone's friends, he would crack a lot of jokes and jibe people. I don't particularly like these types of people, so I would respond in kind, and he seemed to take that as a challenge. He picked on me frequently in that, it's all in good fun, but I'm borderline a dong kind of way. A couple weeks into the semester, I had to miss a class period. When I got back, I decided to go to his office hours to find out what I missed. I was hanging out in the library between classes and got up to pack my things and go to his office. A very distinct voice in my head said, "No." It was like a thought, but louder and completely random. I haven't experienced anything like that before or since. I wasn't even considering not going until that moment, but I started to get this very strong feeling that I shouldn't go. I was trying to rationalize this super weird feeling and figured, well, his office hours are right before a class period, so why don't I just go talk to him after class? So I did, and nothing happened. I finished out the rest of the semester, and he continued to pick on me and ask me lots of personal questions, which I dodged and ignored. The semester passed without event. 2 semesters later, I'd completely forgotten this class. Hadn't given it another thought. Then, gossip starts to spread that a girl was assaulted by a professor. Nothing came out about it for a while except that the university was denying it and weren't going to take any action against the professor. So the girl went to the local news. She told her story while remaining anonymous and demanded action from the university. The story blew up and started a petition to have the professor removed. That's when his name came out. It was the professor I had 2 semesters earlier who had made a favorite of me. He assaulted the student in his office hours. I immediately burst into tears because I know without a doubt that girl was supposed to be me. But my gut told me that day not to go, and thank God I listened. The professor was eventually removed from the university, but only after a huge protest from the students. Story 20. I'm going to start this with the fact that I'm a man of science. science. In high school, I had a friend get in a terrible accident. He was in the ICU, emergency surgery, whole deal. It's been a few days since the accident. I get a call from a mutual friend who more recently visited him in the ICU. He reports he's still comatose, intubated, but they feel hopeful. Later that night, I'm playing video games. I just suddenly feel my whole body shudder. It's hard to describe, but I just felt wrong. All over. I put the controller down and just sat there stunned. I know my friend is gone. I can't explain it, but I know. Sure enough, within the hour, we get a call that he passed. Like I said, I can't explain it. I don't believe in psychics, mediums, ghosts, whatever. The rational part of my brain says it's coincidence. A panic attack and unrealized emotion manifesting in a moment of quiet solitude. If my friend hadn't passed, I would have forgotten this episode. But, man, that's the closest I've ever felt to something supernatural. Story 21. I was walking through my local Target when I passed a guy going the opposite direction. He didn't have a cart or anything, and as I passed, he suddenly decided to turn and go the other way from which he was headed. It caught my attention as odd that he was so aimless. I don't know if it was my past in retail or just a natural instinct. I kept my eye on him as I was walking to a register and he walked past me. As I watched him, he walked up to the gift card section where a woman in sweats crouched, looking through the gift cards. I wondered if he knew her since he seemed to have been aware of her being there and directed at her. That's when he walked away, pulled out his phone, and then walked back to where she was. He positioned himself behind her and took a picture. I could see the screen from where I was, and I saw the blink of the screen and the still image of this modestly dressed woman in leisure clothes with a hat. The most skin you could see of her was her hands. That's what disturbed me the most about it. She looked normal, but this creep targeted her. I walked up to the checkout girl and asked if there's security in the building, so she called them over. The man had walked off at this point, but once security came over, I saw him in the grocery area and described him while pointing him out. Another security guy walked up and asked what was happening. We filled him in and he said, "Oh, the guy from the parking lot?" Yikes. This guy has been on a mission or something. I don't even want to know what he was doing in the parking lot to get security's attention. It was a very bizarre and I would say scary situation, and I didn't know how to handle it. But I knew I had to do or say something, but I didn't know how to insert myself between the guy and this unsuspecting woman. I'm still not sure if I should have actually approached, but I'm glad that at least security was involved. Maybe this is my cynicism, but I'm surprised security cared. Now, that's not me saying they shouldn't. They should. It's creepy behavior that needs to absolutely be punished or reprimanded or whatever. But I like that they actually wanted to do something about it and they cared who this guy was and that he was a threat in some way to the customers, even if it was just a threat to privacy. It's just gross behavior. Not a fan of taking unsolicited pictures of people in public in general. This kind of targeted creep shot though, yuck. Hate that with every fiber of my being. Story 22. We did a tour at the public preschool. We met the teacher they wanted to place my kid with. It was the last month and a half before school let out, but they wanted my daughter now for her social development struggles. It was a half special ed class, half general ed. The teacher seemed mad we were there. She had a mask on, but you could tell she never smiled. She had a small class, only 9 other kids besides mine. It was dirty, and the kids immediately were all over me for attention. The teacher knocked over a barrier, and an autistic student panicked because it was against the rules to remove a barrier. That teacher looked at him, crying and panicking, rolled her eyes, and ignored him. I, a visitor, bent down to comfort him and picked the barrier up. My gut, as a teacher and parent, said the teacher wasn't right. The kids were too excited for a stranger who just smiled and engaged with them. She ignored a kid in distress. None of the kids looked happy. It was dirty. None of the kids were excited when it was their turn for one-on-one work. My husband assured me I was just anxious and to trust that the school would be a positive change. First day went okay because multiple district-level people were helping out my daughter to adjust. But my daughter said the teacher hurt her arm during drawing. On my daughter's second day, I caught the teacher calling her students little frickers, saying it wasn't her job to clean up after them, and yes, it is, by the way, and throwing things. She also yelled at my daughter to shut up. My kid is 3, and some of that evil woman's students were nonverbal. They couldn't tell their parents she was acting crazy. I wasn't believed, and no other staff heard her. The principal did nothing. As a teacher, I was appalled. I pulled her out second day, but wasn't allowed to contact the other parents. Since we were new, I didn't get a contact list. I cried so hard that I didn't trust my gut. I apologized to her for not being able to protect her. I feel horrible that I couldn't protect the other kids in that class. They deserve better. No student should be mistreated like that. Story 23. Back when I was about 10 or 11, I asked my mother if we could take my grandma out to lunch. She was kind of against it, but I kept insisting that I really wanted to see her and that she would want to go to lunch that day. While we were out at the mall after getting lunch with my grandmother, she started slurring her speech and became extremely confused. She was having a stroke. Luckily, my mom noticed what was going on and got her to the hospital within 20 or 30 minutes. Doctors said they were able to stop the stroke and she came out of it basically the same as she was before. A couple of days after the fact, my mom told me I had basically saved my grandmother's life by making sure we went out to lunch that day with her. Now, OP, this is incredible. I feel like I gotta know, were you the type of kid, though, who would invite the grandparents out to lunch often or would want to do these things often, or was it a really spur-of-the-moment thing? Because if it was a one-off, sort of out-of-character moment for you, look, that's something special. I don't know what I would describe it as, but it's definitely almost supernatural. Saving people with gut feelings is so cool. I know that's a weird way to describe it, but I can't think of any other way to say it. It's just amazing. Story 24. When I was a kid, I was doing my first ever deep clean of my bedroom, getting rid of old clothes and toys and such. While cleaning out my closet, I found an old picture cut out from the local newspaper of Lyndon Johnson visiting my parents' hometown. The picture was taken outside with some locals in the background. I was going to throw the picture away, but suddenly got the strongest feeling not to do it, so I set it aside. Later, I showed it to my mom and asked her about it. She freaked out and showed my grandma, who also freaked out. Turns out one of the locals in that picture was my grandpa. He died when my mom was 12, and that picture was one of only a handful we had of him. I had never seen a picture of him before this. I was so glad I didn't throw that clipping away. Story 25. Found a new flatmate had ended himself a week after moving in. I advertised a room on our national buy-sell page. A guy replies and we meet a few times. Really nice French guy, great English, stable job, and into the outdoors. He moves in on Saturday. We talk over the next few days for no more than 5 minutes in passing around the house during the day. Friday, Saturday, Sunday come around and I haven't seen or heard him, but his door is shut. I thought he was working nights and we just didn't sync up. I joked with my partner that he was a drug addict and was dead, but we both laughed it off. I mean, come on, what are the chances? Sunday evening, I follow through with my gut that was telling me something wasn't right. So I knock on his door. Worst case, he's asleep and I wake him. Best case, he's not there. He had ended himself 6 days after moving in. Police estimate he's been cold for 3 days. He had been suffering from serious depression and planned it all out. I felt so guilty for not seeing it sooner, but I barely knew him. Total of maybe 10 minutes talking total. Story 26. Was the first day of a summer camp. Something felt off and my stomach got queasy immediately after getting out of the car. I was told I'd be sleeping with about 14 other boys my age under an old, crusty tent with no floor or screen door to keep bugs out during the hottest and most humid month in recent years. I asked to go to the bathroom because I was feeling sick. Then I told my dad, who was with me, that I had a stomach ache and I needed to go home. We packed our things and left. My dad told me as we got into the car, "Thank goodness you fell to us off there too. I didn't feel comfortable with you in the crappy tent while I was in a cabin almost 2 miles away." A massive storm hit the campsite that night. Possible tornadoes in the area too. After everything calmed down there, the cabins and buildings were untouched, while things like the tent I would have been asleep in weren't even on the camp grounds anymore. Thanks, gut feeling. Story 27. The woman who became my former best friend's stepmother. Met her and had instant alarm bells going off in my head that said, keep away from her. I ignored them because, come on, friend's dad isn't an idiot and he dated her for a year. My gut was more than right. That woman made Cinderella stepmother look tame. She would throw things at my friend's dad. She would scream at my friend. She blamed everything on my friend, even when there was no way she could prove it. She even verbally abused her own biological autistic son. She once screamed at me, and when my mom confronted her, she screamed at my mom. My friend was the scapegoat and virtually a slave. She called her lazy for being tired after working 2 jobs and going to college full-time. She tried to get the Wi-Fi shut off so my friend would stop wasting time playing on her computer all day, while my friend was actually doing homework. She is a monster, and I'm pretty sure she's the reason my friend cut ties with me and all our mutual friends. She had to get away from anything and everything that reminded her of her. Story 28. I had to go to a U2 concert. Back when I was a 19-year-old guy living in a crap-hole southern Indiana town in 1997, U2 was on tour. This was also back in the day before you could just go to a website and look up dates, so finding out a band was playing in a nearby non-crap-hole town was a lot harder. I was listening to the radio one night and found out U2 was going to be playing in St. Louis. As soon as I heard about it, I had this strange urge that I had to go. I'd been to a lot of concerts by that point and have been to even more since. I have a shoebox overflowing with ticket stubs, but had never felt the need to go to a show this badly. I told a female friend of mine about it, and we decided we should go. Her boyfriend and a couple of other people she was friends with did too. I've always had a knack for getting good seats, so I said I would get them and they could all pay me. I put them on my charge card and got some amazing seats, ones that had just been put into the system that morning. A week or two later, I got the tickets in the mail and my friend was having a party that weekend. Everybody who was going to the show was going to be there, so the plan was they would all pay me that night. Night of the party comes and everything goes to crap. The lady I was friends with, in the words of her boyfriend who was there, went off the deep end. Out of nowhere, she just started yelling at one of her friends and me about how she just knew we had tried to break into her house that summer while she was in Croatia. Also, we could clean her carpets. That's not a euphemism, and I'm not leaving out details either. It truly was one of the oddest experiences of my life. It was one of the most hurtful things I ever experienced, too, because she was one of my best friends. After she was done yelling, she kicked us out. I made sure I grabbed the tickets before I left because no one had paid me yet, and I still knew I had to go for some reason. She called me a week or so later asking when she could come pick up the tickets. I still wanted to go, and I knew if I went ahead and gave them their tickets, I would have a long drive by myself, followed up by sitting with a crazy person and her friends. I also knew if I kept them, I could kiss any sort of friendship with her goodbye, and I would be stuck with these really expensive seats and I had no idea what to do with them. I ended up doing the only thing that made sense. I told her I'd sold them already, and if she wanted to go, she could buy her own seats. She very quickly and angrily hung up on me. I still knew I just had to go. I ended up selling one to another friend of mine. I also went to a local fair and ran into a girl I was friends with in high school who just loved U2. So she jumped at the chance to go see them again, especially when she saw how good the seats were. I sold her one and she asked if she could bring a friend, and I happily agreed, since it was another expensive ticket sold to a non-crazy person. I also sold one to a guy I knew online. The day of the show finally rolls around, and the plan was everybody would meet at my parents' apartment and then make the drive to St. Louis together. I'm super excited because the big day is finally here, and I'm finally ready to see how my life is going to change. My friend gets there first, and we're hanging out in my room like usual, waiting for the girl from school and her friend to get there. Eventually, they do, and my mom lets them in and tells them to go on back to my room down the hall. I hear them and come into the hallway as I see my friend and her friend coming back. I still remember so clearly seeing the girl who got the extra ticket smile as she came back. When I saw that smile, I knew it was over. That was it right there. That was the reason I'd gone through all of that stuff. That was how my life was going to change. I knew I was going to spend the rest of my life doing everything I could to see that smile as much as I possibly could. We hit it off great too. On the ride home, the other people slept while she drove and we talked for hours the whole way back. It took me a little while, but that spring I finally got up the nerve to ask her out. She said yes. 4 months later, she said yes when I asked her to marry me. A year later, she also said I do. Today, almost 24 years after the concert, we're still incredibly happy together. We've got a couple of kids and a dog. We've had to go through a lot of crap to get here, but I can honestly say I still have more fun with her than anyone I've ever met. I'm also still doing everything I can to see that beautiful smile. I'm not a super strong believer in fate or anything like that, but for stories like these, I sort of suspend my disbelief. Because isn't it a beautiful thought that OP knew that they had to do this because it was going to lead to what they were meant to have or who they were meant to meet? Something about that thought, while illogical, sure, is beautiful in a way. Maybe it's because I'm a sappy artist, who knows? This is a beautiful, amazing, touching story to end it on. Thank you so much for sharing, OP. I had a feeling where it was going because I didn't read it beforehand, but when it got there, it hit so good. I hope it hit good for you too. I hope it's not only me who's enjoying this. Anyway, that is going to be all the time we have for today. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.